Greetings. We begin with this question. What are spiritual seatbelts? When a passenger jet is approaching turbulent weather, the pilot turns on the seatbelt sign. This means sit back down, get anchored to your seat, and prepare for a bumpy ride. Now, Jesus warns of very turbulent times as the tribulation approaches us. Matthew 24:15. Therefore, when you see, speaking to any Bible reader of the New Testament, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. Where is that? The Temple Mount is the holy place because the Temple Mount was built for the temple to be built on top of the Temple Mount. So somewhere up there on the Temple Mount is the holy place. Verse 16. Let those who are in Judea, the land of Israel, flee to the mountains. Get out of town. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. Well, that would only take a few minutes, right? But Jesus says, don't do it. You have to hear the message and you have to immediately leave your house and go towards the mountains. Verse 18. Let him who is in the field, if you're working in the field, not go back to get his clothes or his cloak. If you've left your cloak on a fence post the opposite direction, don't go get it, says Jesus. Matthew 24:21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now, World War II was a very turbulent, terrible, great tribulation time, but it is small in comparison to this coming great tribulation. Jesus had Daniel write about this great 3.5-year tribulation, which continues until the Battle of Armageddon. When the Battle of Armageddon is complete, the tribulation is complete, and we begin the kingdom of God on earth. In Daniel 12, verse 1, Daniel describes events leading up to this great tribulation. It says in verse 1 of Daniel 12, at that time Michael shall stand up, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. So virtually the same kind of language that Jesus used, and Daniel says, this, at that time, this is going to happen. What did he mean at that time? Well, in Daniel 11:41, just a few verses before, 12 verse 1, describes a massive military invasion of Egypt, yes, Egypt, and many other nations near and around Israel. Daniel 11:41 says, he, that's the king of the north, number one, if you do some extra study, shall also enter the glorious land. In Bible terms, what's the glorious land? The glorious land is the land of Israel. It's God's people's land. Jerusalem, Israel, and so on. He says, he shall also enter the glorious land, and, same breath, many countries shall be overthrown. So, we are talking many, not a few, not one or two, many countries in the Middle East will be overthrown. Verse 42, he shall stretch out his hand against the countries, the many countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. All right? And another verse, the next verse tells us that this invading military power has total control over all of the precious things of Egypt. So it's not just a nation-building effort this time. It's a serious, total capture, conquer, take control kind of invasion. The modern nation of Israel came into being in 1948. And Egypt was an enemy nation to Israel until a peace accord was signed in 1978. Now, from 1978 until today, there has been no great invasion of the land of Egypt. So, our modern Israel, 1948, then the Peace Accord, 1978, and since 1978, no great invasion of the land of Egypt. So we're still waiting for the great invasion of the land of Egypt to come. But when it does come, it will be time for God's servants to buckle up their spiritual seatbelts. After Egypt is invaded, there comes a huge three-power military conflict which totally changes the balance of power for planet Earth. It's going to be a totally different world when that takes place. Daniel 11:44. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Okay, when you read this verse, you have to go back a couple of verses and say, where is he, the king of the north, number one? Where is his military might? Where is his power? Where are his troops? Well, they entered Israel, so we know some of his troops are in Israel. They captured or overthrew or invaded many Middle Eastern nations, right? So he's got troops in many Middle Eastern nations. And then so he's in the Middle East. He's centered around Jerusalem, shall we say. North of Jerusalem is a mighty military power. And east of Jerusalem is a mighty military power. So verse 44 says, but news from the east and the north shall trouble him. And this is such a short verse, you almost can't comprehend it by just reading it word by word by word by word. You almost have to take it one or two words and stop and think. One or two words, stop and think. One or two words and stop and think. Therefore, he shall go out with great fury. So this news from the north and the east troubles him mightily. He goes out with great fury. When you have a military and you send great fury, watch out. The next couple of words, to destroy and annihilate many. So we have three military powers. We have one that does the invasion of Egypt. We have two that are unhappy with that, and they do something that really annoys the one who invaded Egypt, and he goes forth to destroy and annihilate the other two. So after one more verse in Daniel 11:45, we just read Daniel 11:44, comes the description of the beginning of the Great Tribulation, where Satan's king is given permission to make war with the saints. Revelation 13:7. It was granted to him, the king, the beast power king, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe and tongue and nation. It's going to be a global effort. There's going to be a global ruling world which comes during the tribulation. We talked about Egypt. That comes before the tribulation. Once the tribulation starts, then this beast power king makes war with the saints. And those who dwell on earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb from the foundation of the world. Then verse 9. Verse 9 is just like a little insert verse. It says, you just read some of the news. Verse 9, if anyone has an ear, what does that mean? Everybody has ears, right? It means if you want to know, if anyone has an ear, if you're interested in knowing what all this means, Jesus says through the Revelation, John writing, if anyone has an ear, let him hear, meaning let him make the effort to understand. And how are you going to do that? You study his words. You study the words in the book of Revelation. You study the words in Daniel. You study the tribulation. You study the Egypt war. You study the annihilation and destruction of two mighty military powers. You study the coming of the king of the north, number 3, which is the beast power of Revelation. So when we see news reports of Egypt being captured, we need to buckle up and be as mentally prepared as we can be, because the worst time of trouble is coming fast. Now, before the Egypt invasion is a really good time, like now, to start getting prepared. But lots of people, they like doing a term paper. It's like they say, well, I'll just do that later. And I'll do that at the last minute. So the last minute people, this is the message for the last minute people. When you see the invasion of Egypt, you really seriously need to get focused. And once it happens, we can know that the Great Tribulation will be right around the corner. Now, there's another way to know of the Great Tribulation, and that is morning and evening sacrifices. But I believe this Egypt invasion is even earlier than the setting up of the morning and evening sacrifices. And so Egypt is like, it's unexpected. People do not expect that any mighty military power is going to invade and capture Egypt. Right now, Egypt is friendly. Egypt is helpful on the world scene. And was almost taken over by the Muslim Brotherhood, but then that got reversed. So right now we're back to Egypt is friendly, Egypt is helpful towards Israel, and so the time is not now. But the Bible says the time is coming, and when that time comes, that will be an urgent wake-up call for all of us, for everyone who's got any idea that Egypt is going to be captured, to wake up and realize that they are about to sail right into the Great Tribulation. Jesus frequently taught about watching and being on guard. If you read through Matthew 24, there's a whole section of you need to be ready, you need to be prepared. In fact, the four great parables in Matthew 24 and 25, they're all saying the same kind of theme. They're saying the servant who is watching will be blessed, the servant who is not watching will be punished. And it talks about the 10 virgins, and 5 of them were prepared for the unexpected. They were prepared to go the extra distance, whereas 5 were not prepared. They said, a little bit of oil, that'll be fine, not to worry, it'll work out, don't worry. Then the parable of the talents. 2 of them in the parable, they worked hard, they developed more talents, and they were rewarded. And the third one mentioned said, well, I was afraid and I buried my talent, your talent, in the ground so that you can have it when you come back. And here's your talent, you can have it back. And he was punished. And then the sheep and the goats. So all 4 of those parables in Matthew 24, 25, they're all saying, both chapters are almost shouting at us, watch, you've got to watch, you've got to be watching. Well, a lot of people say, well, watching what? Well, this is classic. Watching for Egypt to be invaded and captured. When that happens, then another far bigger than that world event is about to happen. And after that happens comes the Great Tribulation that people have been reading about in the book of Revelation and in Matthew 24 for a long, long time. So Mark 13:37, and what I say to you, Jesus speaking, what I say to you, I say to all. Now, since this is in the New Testament, people have been reading this for 2,000 years, so Jesus is saying to all 2,000 years worth of Bible readers, watch. That's it, one word. And I'll read that again. What I say to you, said Jesus in Mark 13:37, I say to all, watch. Connecting our spiritual seatbelts is the same as what Jesus wrote in Mark 13:33, where Jesus says to us, take heed, pay close attention, and watch and pray.